What are some of the stupidest scams that people do? Let's get right into it and start with number 5, playing with fire. Adam Magill stands accused of ripping off taxpayers and laundering cash through an illegal scheme. However, further investigations have revealed that Magill didn't just rip off taxpayers, he also found a way to father a child with the ex-fiancee of a former client. And that former client happens to be behind bars awaiting trial for charges of trafficking and possession. There aren't many more complicated situations than the one Adam Magill has found himself in, but we'll try our best to explain everything clearly. The first thing you should know is that Magill has been charged as part of a 6-man crew following an 18-month Crime and Corruption Commission investigation into the dealings of a Brisbane law firm. The investigations revealed that Magill and his crew were responsible for aggravated fraud, fraudulent falsification of records, and aggravated money laundering. The investigations also revealed that Magill and his crew defrauded taxpayer-funded legal aid service of about $340,000 and then failed to deposit more than $700,000 into a separate trust account. And here's where the story gets dicey. A while back, Magill had an interesting client named Ivan Tesic. If there ever was a criminal name, it's Ivan Tesic. Tesic was held on trafficking charges and was the fiancée of Natalie Lucas, a South African model. Magill took a liking to Lucas, and they started dating while Ivan Tesic was already in custody. So it happened that Magill started dating the fiancée of his client shortly after the client went to prison. It sounds just as bad as it looks. But it gets even worse. Miss Lucas didn't just start dating Magill, she also moved in with him and lived with him for 2 years. But their fairy tale love didn't last forever. After Lucas decided that she was leaving Magill, she discovered that she was pregnant by him. She weighed the pros and cons and decided that she would have the baby despite leaving Magill. But what about when Ivan gets out of jail? Lucas's decision means that whenever Ivan Tesic gets out of jail, he'll be meeting an ex-fiancée that has a baby by his former lawyer. And to make things even better, Magill did all of this while he was separated from his wife. The married couple are now back together, though. It doesn't seem like Magill has a huge issue with this potential turn of events. Magill says that he hasn't spoken to Tesic since the time he represented Tesic. He also says he doesn't think the communication breakdown between both men is due to him dating his client's fiancée. We've seen this movie before, Adam. There's definitely going to be some kind of breakdown. Natalie Lucas, on the other hand, has another story to tell. She says that Tesic threatened Magill when she broke up with him just before he was remanded in jail. This means that Ivan Tesic may still have bad blood for Magill. Thankfully, Tesic remains in prison, lifting weights and being scary. Unfortunately for Magill, he may not remain in prison forever. Currently, Ivan Tesic is charged with illegal trafficking and possession crimes. If he's found guilty, he might spend long years in prison, but he might also get out of jail early. And if he does, who knows the sort of things that may be on his mind. It's probably not a fun movie night with his former attorney. Number 4, sign your name on the scam. Katherine Paprocka, a former school administrator in Pennsylvania, embezzled about $600,000 from the school she worked at. Ms. Paprocka used the money from the theft to rent properties, go on family vacations, and even pay for in-vitro fertilization medical treatments. Paprocka carried out her scheme by taking out loans and electronically signing them, falsely representing herself. The school carried out an audit of its account and found that Paprocka had illegally transferred money from school accounts to a crowdfunding platform and 3 other small business lenders. Paprocka's name was signed on every loan, where she was listed as the executive director and owner of the school, despite the fact that the school is a non-profit and doesn't actually have any ownership. Investigators also discovered that Paprocka had paid over $60,000 into her credit card. When she accounted for those expenses to the school, she misrepresented the figures and argued that she only took $12,000. But that wasn't all she did. Further investigation into her scam led to the discovery that she'd stolen several identities of senior figures at the school and forged multiple signatures to complete her theft. With the amount of money she was embezzling and spending, it was only a matter of time before she was caught. Paprocka has now been charged with multiple felonies, including, but not limited to, forgery, theft by deception, and deceptive or fraudulent business practices. Her bail was set at $99,000, and she's since been released from jail. However, Paprocka had to surrender her passport and was forbidden from leaving the state. Number 3. COVID cars. A California man named Mustafa Kadiri used payment protection relief funds released as part of COVID-19 funds to purchase luxury cars and lead a lavish lifestyle. In total, Kadiri got about $5 million in these payment protection funds, and he splurged over half of it on luxury cars and personal expenses. These payments were usually released to business owners who wanted to continue paying employees in spite of COVID, and Kadiri took advantage of them. He submitted paperwork proving that he owned 4 businesses in Newport Beach, California. However, there was one tiny snag. None of those businesses were operational, and all of them had gone defunct a while ago. But Kadiri's papers looked legit, and he got funds totaling about $5 million. Our accomplished businessman wasted absolutely no time spending the money he got from his fraudulent windfall. Kadiri had a taste for exotic cars, so he decided to purchase 3: a Lamborghini, a Ferrari, and a Bentley. He also went on vacations with the money for good measure. What's the point of being a big giant fraudster if you can't go on vacations and eat fancy dinners like all the other cooler fraudsters do? Kadiri was eventually caught by the police. Guess you really cannot buy 3 luxury vehicles on a government loan without attracting some sort of attention. Right now, the businessman has been sentenced to 4.5 years in jail. He was also ordered to pay about $2.8 million in restitution and a $20,000 fine. And remember, Mustafa, when you're taking out a loan, you're generally expected to pay the thing back. Well, at the time he was supposed to. Number 2. Single but married. Andrea Lawner defrauded the government of over £70,000 over 5 years, and her scam wasn't even complex. It was merely a single, very beneficial lie that sustained Andrea for 5 years and earned her thousands of pounds. Andrea Lawner registered with social services as a single mother of 2 kids, and she got benefits based on that fact. These benefits include extra working tax credit, income support, and housing allowance. However, Andrea Lawner suffered from the same ailment that many scammers suffer from. She just couldn't keep herself from ratting herself out. But Andrea didn't go and get a new shiny sports car like you'd find on the first page of a scammer's playbook. Instead, she did the next worst thing. She started posting pictures of her kissing her husband on Facebook. Under normal circumstances, this would be irrelevant, but this wasn't normal circumstances and is very relevant because Andrea told the social services that she did not have a husband, but she was posting him on Facebook. Investigators soon found her Facebook account and realized that the single mother of 2 wasn't really a single mother and had taken the government for a ride. The police went to work and seized documents that proved that Andrea had been living her best life with husband while collecting benefits acquired on the presumption that she lived alone. Lawner was arrested for her crimes and was made to face multiple charges of benefit fraud. Andrea Lawner had no choice but to plead guilty and wait for the court to pass its judgment. Luckily for her, the judge decided to be lenient. The judge argued that if Andrea were to be sent to prison, there would be no one to take care of her children. Andrea's last kid is disabled, and the judge considered the welfare of the child seriously as well. Apparently, the husband she's been living with is wholly incapable of taking care of their child. In the end, the judge sentenced her to a 12-month prison sentence, which would be suspended for 24 months. The court also ordered that she undertake 120 hours of unpaid work and pay £220 in costs and victim surcharge. Before we get to number 1, if you love these stories, definitely stay on this video to watch our previous release for more stories about the scammers with the dumbest ideas. Number 1. The Bentley. Daniela Rendon, a glamorous real estate broker, has now been accused of using COVID-19 relief funds to purchase a Bentley. The Rendon case is similar to pretty much every other case in that scammers seem to love using stolen funds to purchase luxury cars. Rendon's fraud wasn't all that complicated. She simply fabricated tax documents that falsified her company's revenue, payroll, and the number of employees she had. Once she got the fake documents ready, she submitted them to approved lenders in New Jersey and Idaho and let roughly $400,000 worth of sweet relief funds start rolling in. Miss Rendon isn't a clueless scammer either, so she knew that she couldn't just withdraw the money from her bank account and start spending it. If she did that, the police would easily trace it and find out that she was running a scam. So she did the smart thing. She got in contact with a payroll processor in New Jersey and started issuing payroll checks to herself, family members, and friends. This meant that even if the police took a cursory interest in her case, they would simply find out that she's been paying employees from the relief funds. It was a great plan, but there was one tiny slip-up. Good old Miss Rendon couldn't simply just keep her money to herself. She felt the need to treat herself, and that's what she did. She got herself a beautiful Bentley Bentayga, rented a posh Biscayne Bay apartment, and paid for some cosmetic work. She also used a part of the money to repair a damaged designer shoe she owned. Rendon couldn't keep her shiny toys to herself forever, and the authorities finally figured out what she was doing. She was soon arrested by the police and was promptly charged with 7 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of money laundering, and 1 count of aggravated identity theft. If convicted, Miss Rendon could treat herself up to 20 years in prison. She was first known as Swiffer Girl before she was caught scamming, and her Instagram pics were used in court to convict her. And he came up with the worst idea for his cash flow problems from his gambling issue. Let's get right into it. Number 3, gambling problems. Famous sports talk show host Craig Carton was disgraced when police arrested him for committing fraud when he convinced people to hand over millions of dollars for a supposed investment opportunity. Carton was arguably one of the best-known radio voices in the country. He had a lot of fans that trusted him, and he used his influence over them to his advantage. His morning show was called The Boomer and Carton Show, and his co-host was ex-NFL quarterback Boomer Esiason. The morning of Carton's arrest, Esiason initially told listeners that he called in sick, but midway through the broadcast, he announced that Carton wasn't there because he was arrested. He was as shocked as listeners were to learn that Carton was placed into custody by an FBI agent. Carton's career in journalism began when he graduated from Syracuse University in 1991 with a degree in broadcast journalism. Quickly after graduation, he worked at stations across the country, including Buffalo, Cleveland, Denver, and New York City. One of the first shows he hosted was called The Sports Guys, a morning show where the hosts joke while talking about different sports games. He became a polarizing figure that touched upon offensive material and generated controversy. At the height of his career, when he was working on the Boomer and Carton Show, Carton was making $2 million a year. Carton loved gambling, and his addiction soon spiraled out of control, leaving him in millions of dollars of debt. His fascination with gambling began when he was young, and in his memoir, he spoke about a gambling den that he ran from his parents' living room when he was a kid. He got Esiason to gamble during one of their shows when Carton suggested that he could turn Esiason's $10,000 into $25,000. Esiason agreed to the bet, and Craig returned with $80,000 instead of the $25,000 he originally promised. The bet with Esiason was a small amount of money compared to the amount of debt that Craig incurred. Blackjack was his obsession. He borrowed $30 million from multiple sources to fund his addiction. His ego was inflated, and he saw himself as undefeated. He would run into the casino before work and leave with hundreds of thousands of dollars, only to return later and do the same thing. As his debt amassed, Carton turned to loan sharks to borrow money for his casino trips. One of them was a general manager of Upper East Side strip club Sapphire 39, who lent Craig multiple high-interest loans for as much as $500,000 each in 2016 and 2017. He didn't celebrate when he won hundreds of thousands of dollars or bemoan when he lost the same amount. His addiction made him oblivious to winning and losing. Carton's scheme was to resell tickets to events to investors. He ran the business with Michael Wright and a third unnamed man. They solicited millions of dollars from investors. A hedge fund firm gave Carton more than $5 million throughout 2016 and thought the money would be invested into tickets for Barbra Streisand and Metallica concerts. He fabricated emails and contracts to gain investors' trust. One of his emails was written to look like it was from Fred Mangione, who was the chief of staff of Brooklyn Sports and Entertainment, which is the company that owns the Barclays Center. Carton had zero of the connections he pretended to have in the industry, and it was only a matter of time before he was caught. In the early morning of September 6, 2017, Carton was on his way to host his morning radio show when he was approached by an FBI agent and taken into custody. He was sentenced to 3.5 years in prison, followed by 3 years probation. He was charged with securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit those offenses. However, Carton told a different story and claimed to be the victim of David Molnar and Joseph Melly. Molnar is managing director of Screen Capital International, and he's also known for being Katie Couric's brother-in-law. He was accused of being deeply involved with Joseph Melly, a convicted fraudster sentenced to 6.5 years in prison for committing a $100 million ticket-selling scam. In 2020, Carton was placed on house arrest where he served the rest of his sentence in luxury. His home was a $1.8 million 4-acre property with 14 rooms, a movie theater, 8 televisions, arcade games, a gym, and a saltwater pool. In August 2020, he filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, claiming that he owed creditors, victims, banks, his wife, and the federal government $9.4 million, of which his expected income was only $52,000 a year. According to the bankruptcy, he owed money to 49 creditors and $4.84 million to the federal government in restitution. His other debts include $603,000 to Inversions Y Entremiento, $490,000 to Brookfield Hospitality Properties, $385,000 to Sugar House Casino, and $351,000 to American Express. He also owed $425,000 to Robert Kent, who lent him $635,000 before his arrest. In a separation agreement, his wife got $800,000 from him, but at the time of the bankruptcy filing, he owed an unspecified amount in domestic obligations. The filing included barely luxury items, with no cars or boats mentioned, just a Casio watch worth $100. His income came from Street Smart Video, a company producing a documentary about his downfall. He was making a little over $4,000 a month, but had monthly expenses of $35,932. Those expenses included $5,000 in childcare and education for his 4 children, $15,000 in alimony, maintenance and support, $7,800 in house expenses, and $650 in restitution payments. He revived his career in 2021, but in March of that year, an attorney wrote a letter and entered into the court record that Carton hasn't made a single restitution payment. Number 2. Penn State Guru. Brian Sapp is a Penn State alum who conned his victims out of $1.8 million with lie after lie. He ran a real estate scam where he was supposed to take money from investors to flip distressed properties. However, Sapp never flipped a single house. His college friends weren't surprised that he was the mastermind behind this entire operation. During his days at Penn State, he was kicked out of the architecture program due to his low grades. He handled failure very poorly, letting it destroy his self-confidence and making him want to create an illusion of success. Sapp told his friends and their families that he had contacts to help him find distressed properties in the Washington, D.C. area at low costs. Later, investors learned that he had never flipped a single property, although he bragged to his friends about how well his business venture was going and that he was crushing the real estate market. Some of his victims had to pay taxes on their made-up profits, and when they did so, he convinced them that they should reinvest. In fact, Sapp encouraged many people to reinvest while also encouraging them to talk to friends, families, and even co-workers to invest in his scam. Sapp's operation wasn't the cleverly organized business venture that he advertised. At the beginning of his scheme, he stole the name of the Alexandria home builder he worked for as a construction manager in 2012. He signed fake documents in the builder's name to legitimize himself, and throughout his scam, he used hundreds of sellers' and buyers' signatures that he had stolen. He set up Novus Properties, where he claimed to have identified distressed single-family homes in the District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia. He would then purchase the properties and resell them to guaranteed buyers. All that he needed from investors were funds to finance the property flips. Sapp fabricated documents to make victims feel safe by handing them money. He always bragged about his made-up success in the industry without ever closing a deal. The cracks in his scam showed themselves quickly when he used the money from newer victims to pay off older victims. His only on-the-job training came from the self-help books he read, when he would engage in self-affirmations but not use any of the skills he read about to turn his business into a legitimate one. He started to bring people on to help him with the business. Sapp convinced his childhood best friend to quit his six-figure paying job to work with Sapp. This friend was so close to Sapp that he named Sapp his children's legal guardian if anything were to happen to him or his wife. When he started working with Sapp, his friend had 3 children, and his wife was pregnant with their 4th. The friend found out shortly after joining Sapp that he wouldn't be provided with health insurance and wouldn't receive any of the money he was promised. Sapp was willing to do whatever it took to get people to keep investing. Although he had already lost most of people's life savings, he decided that he needed to hire actual employees and pay them a wage. He also spent some of the victims' money on advertising the business. Another business expense that Sapp paid for was to attend high-priced conferences. He met with real estate developers and other people in the real estate business. While he was at the conferences, he tried to give advice to the people he met, despite him not having any actual experience in the industry and being a fraud. The rest of the money went towards personal expenses. He went on golf trips and took many vacations, but one of his most notable purchases was a Mercedes van. He used the $80,000 van for tailgating in State College, PA, and outfitted it with satellite TV antennas and flat-screen TVs. He filled the van with beverage service stations, grilling equipment, and other amenities so he could host elaborate tailgating parties. Many of the people that attended the parties and enjoyed his elaborate van were his victims, who had no idea that they were the ones that ultimately funded it. The victims that attended his parties later testified about the over-the-top vehicle. When one of his victims finally went to authorities, Sapp knew his con was over. He claimed that he didn't have the money for a defense attorney, and his parents went into debt paying for one for him. Sapp thoroughly explained his scam to the FBI and prosecutors and shared thousands of falsified documents with them. In March 2019, he was sentenced to 9 years in prison for operating a Ponzi scheme. The scheme made $9 million, and he defrauded $1.8 million from over 20 victims. Number 1. Natural-born scammer. Danielle Miller was a Manhattan native and former Pepperdine University student charged with identity theft and wire fraud. Miller used stolen identities to apply for multiple loans, targeting pandemic relief funds from the federal government. She had a large Instagram following, and her photos were used by prosecutors as court documents. The pictures she posted included ones where she wore expensive clothes from Chanel, Gucci, or Prada. She documented booking seats on private jets and dining at the Beverly Hills Hotel, and shared videos of herself driving a Rolls-Royce convertible. Miller is the daughter of wealthy parents and graduated from the prestigious Horace Mann School, a private preparatory school in New York. She grew up only a few blocks from Bergdorf Goodman, a luxury department store on 5th Avenue in Midtown Manhattan. In 2004, when she was in 8th grade, Miller became known as the Swiffer Girl. She was dared by a boy online to prove that she wasn't a prude. Miller accepted the challenge and recorded herself in 3 sexually explicit videos that featured the household sweeper. She claimed that being the Swiffer Girl made her popular and that everyone wanted to be around Swiffer Girl. Her friends remembered the story differently and were used to her frequent lies during those years. She hired a fake Rod Stewart to perform at her Sweet 16 and tried to pass him off as the real singer. A friend also claimed that she told them that her dad owned their building. Miller used to deny lying, but now she admits that it was something she often did when she was younger. Miller always loved being the center of attention and used social media to stay in the public eye. She started a TikTok account while she awaited trial, ignoring her probation officer's advice to delete all of her social media. She loved to show off her lavish lifestyle and owned many designer items. When federal agents searched her home, they found a Rolex, a Dior blouse and shoes, a Louis Vuitton bag, and Rimowa luggage. In 2016, she was featured in the Model on a Mission magazine, where she was called a philanthropist and entrepreneur. The article listed her charitable work, claiming that she co-founded a charitable organization, Fashion Forward, which raised funds for orphaned children in Botswana. It was used to tell the world about the online boutique she launched, where she planned to donate 5% of her closet profits to different charities every 3 months. While the article made her seem selfless and focused on the needs of others, it's most likely a post that was paid for by her. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section below what you would rather do: pay for food at the airport or pay for snacks at the movie theater.